So we're going to hear from some of the vendors and some city and county staff related to some of these programs so that everyone can get a better idea about what these will look like and get some questions answered as to these programs. We've been hearing about these programs for a while, but you'll get some more sort of top line information about these programs today. And then also be able to ask any questions. The elected officials will be able to ask any questions. In the interest of time, we won't be taking any questions from the public, but you can always send your questions to questions@montgomerythrive.org, and that gets reviewed every day. So if you have a question about today's meeting or anything that we talk about, anyone from the public can email us at questions@montgomerythrive.org. So we're going to answer any questions we can, have the vendors answer any questions they're able to answer here for you on these programs, and then we're going to talk about the current allocations and obligations, sort of where we are with the money. You guys, we gave you a spreadsheet that you can kind of take a look at. We're going to go through that, go over that broadly, and then talk about the obligations and maybe making some additional obligations, or at least talk about those ideas today. And then what are the next steps? We have emailed you guys, the elected officials, we've emailed you the project ideas that have come through the Montgomery Thrive portal. And so you can take a look at anything that anyone has submitted. If there's something in there that appeals to you that you want us to check out, we're happy to do that. And then we'll talk about final updates, and then we'll dismiss for the day. As always, we're always here after this meeting or at any time to answer any questions or to run down any leads you guys want us to do. But with that, I'm going to go ahead. Terry, did I miss anything? Okay. With that, I'm going to call on Eddie Compton from the city to talk about the homelessness initiatives and homelessness investments.
Good afternoon. So listen, I've been asked to give you an update on the homeless funding, on homeless investment. And what we've done is we've tried to be proactive. We've tried to use our information and our experience from the task force on addressing homelessness to come up with a plan in Montgomery that's going to fix some of the processes and some of the issues that we're having in Montgomery with homelessness. So what we're calling the RFP is a Consolidated Homeless Service Center. And that's important for you to know, is because right now, everybody has their own organizations and they're doing their own things, but we're trying to get them to unite so that we can do a few things. We want them to unite so that we can actually sustain the program. And I think that's what everybody wants to do with this money, to be able to sustain whatever we create. And we also want to make sure that we're addressing the needs that are actually happening in Montgomery. A lot of times we look at these plans and you get information from other places, but we've done the work, we have the data right here in Montgomery, and we feel like this RFP will address some of those issues. So with that being said, let me just go into some of the issues or some of the summary for the RFP. So the first thing that we found in the process that you should be aware of is the consolidated entry portion of it. We have smaller homeless organizations that don't have the money to even enter that particular coordinated entry or to give us that data. And because we don't have that data, the process is we're not getting all of the funding that we need from the federal government and from the state government because they can't enter all that data into the system. Also, in that proposal, we're addressing, like I said before, a consolidated effort. Right now, we're starting with 5 different organizations: the Mid-Alabama Coalition Against the Homeless, the MAP Center, CareStar, which is our mental health facility, Quiet Storm, which is our outreach coordinators. And let me say something about that. Right now, in the city of Montgomery, we have one outreach person, basically being able to address all of the homelessness in Montgomery. Now, we've got mental health, they have their outreach team. We have substance abuse, they have their outreach team. We also have the veterans, they have an outreach team. But we've got one person in Montgomery that's addressing outreach. So that's why we're actually engaging Quiet Storm. And then we have Salvation Army. Those are the ones that we have already engaged or started with to go into this consolidated building to to actually be able to obtain or provide essential services for the homeless in Montgomery. Now let me say, we have selected some or a location. It's not in writing, but we want them to be able to sustain this, not just with the essential services, but we want them to be able to build affordable houses. We know there's nothing we're going to be able to do in that foundation I just mentioned if we don't put them in homes. And we're not looking at just affordable housing. We're looking at supportive housing. We're looking at transitional housing. We're looking at purpose-built communities. So what we looked at is the MAP Center and the area around the MAP Center to be able to do that or to be able to engage that. Keep in mind, that's just a proposal, but I wanted to give you a framework or a map in your head to see where we were going with this. So you've got a one-stop shop for homelessness, and then around that building, you've got areas that are dilapidated, blight, where you can build transitional homes, supportive homes, and purpose-built communities. And last but not least, this consolidated system is what I'm calling, I like to call it the Montgomery Heart Center. So you're gonna have a one-stop shop, you're gonna have outreach going out and actually assessing or engaging those people, saying what types of essential services that they need. They're gonna bring them back to that one place, and then we're gonna be able to, in our second phase, be able to build the housing that they need to be able to support them and transition them into permanent homes. And the reason we want to do this, or to submit this RFP for your approval, is to create a central location to provide that location for homelessness. We want to create an environment where citizens will actually know where to get help, not just to call 211. We want them to be able to say, hey, my friend is homeless, where can I take him? Everybody's gonna know this is the place where you can get all of the essential services for that homeless person. We wanna streamline the finances in participating in the homelessness. Right now, everybody's applying for this grant. They're coming to the county and the city for funding. Well, if you had one person that's answering for all of those people and coming in for that funding, that's better. We can better sustain that. Not only that, the homeless organizations that participate in this particular RFP will be able to use some of their operating funds that they didn't have to spend in their own building to actually help homeless people in Montgomery. And the last thing I'll say before I take my seat is that this RFP was taken directly from the federal government. So when we say Consolidated Homeless Service Center, we'll be able to directly apply for federal funding because we're doing what they did or what they're asking for. And I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. We're going to try to hold the questions until all the presentations are made.
Okay.
And so anybody that wants to ask a homeless question, we'll have him come back up.
Can you get a copy of that?
Yeah.
You get a copy, Eddie, you giving her a copy?
Of the RFP itself?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we have copy.
Okay, thank you.
And next, we're going to have countywide camera upgrades.
Good afternoon. Hey, everyone. We have a map that we're placing up on the screen here. Initially, what we did, we started putting cameras throughout the city in disparate locations where we already had fiber throughout the city. What you're looking at here is a map of violent crime for the past year in a heat map fashion so that you can see it in a broad view. And we also have existing fiber throughout the city where we're able to connect cameras on roadways. What we're looking for here is...
Slow down, I'm sorry. I really want to understand what we're looking at. You said it's a map of violent crime. Will you
Yes, ma'am.
explain what I'm looking at, please?
Absolutely, it's hard because of the extent of the map. So what you're looking at, any of the green, red, and yellow areas, it's a heat map. So essentially it's violent crime by density. So if you have heavy density, i.e. lots of violent crime in one area, you're going to see red signified on the map. As you start spreading a little bit further out, you're going to see green. And in areas where you don't see a color at all, the density doesn't match the threshold that we
Is that
selected.
interstate, the green that's going, is that mostly interstate?
So the interstate it doesn't have a specific color because that we're following fiber along. So what you see in red is the way that the fiber runs. The interstate's very hard to see
So
on
the
here.
red's fiber, right?
There is
The
fiber.
red is fiber. In this picture, the single lines, the red is fiber, right? It's not
Yes, sir.
crime along one strip.
No, sir, that's a fiber line. And so essentially what we came up with was we're putting out cameras throughout the city, but we were limited in where we could place these cameras due to connectivity. And so this project's about expanding connectivities and cameras throughout town. And I'll let Mr. Wesley Cox, the Director of Traffic Engineering, speak about the expansion of fiber.
So most of it's in the downtown area?
The,
The
I'm
fiber,
talking about most of the crime is in the downtown.
so, right, you can see kind of the blobs of green and yellow and red. That's the heat map of the violent crime. So downtown is you can see where downtown is right there. There's a good bit to the north and just east of downtown. And then again, you've got that area kind of west of downtown headed south. So that's your violent crime heat map. The lines are going to be your fiber optic network that we have in place. You can see a purple and also a red. That's the existing city network. So there's a few different ways that you can expand this camera coverage. It all involves having connectivity to bring that footage back to us with the city. So this is a network that you see that was built over time, primarily for traffic, for intelligent transportation. But it's useful as a city network. This allows us to connect without having to lease network from someone else, without having to pay for a connection to a service provider that we share bandwidth with other customers. So the idea is to expand what you see here. And what we have proposed, there's 4 locations where we have existing communication cables that are hung aerially above ground on the power company poles. Those we can come back and we can overlash, we can put new cable on those and do it for a cheaper price and go ahead and connect those and get cameras installed on that. We've got one on Fairview Avenue. It's a little bit more difficult to see up here on this map, but from Fairview Avenue over at Air Base Boulevard all the way back around to Narrow Lane Road and then up Norman Bridge Road would be one. We've got a project on Del Rado Road. Atlanta Highway, there's a short segment that would finish connecting pretty much the entire length of Atlanta Highway. And then we have a small piece on Wares Ferry Boulevard. Those are all cheaper, easier aerial projects that we can do. Then there's another,
Well, where's, stop. Talking about we're hanging on the Alabama Power pole?
that's right, these are locations where we already have existing city cable hanging on the Alabama Power poles that we are able to go back in and put new fiber on top of.
Can you go on existing, for new lines, can you go on the Power County pole?
Yes.
I was told you couldn't do that.
This is only locations where we already have it in place. It's been there prior to any agreements that had to be made, so we're able to continue to use it. Those are the only locations. That's why we picked those out, because those are the ones that we could do. So beyond that, like Mr. Jenwright was saying, we're not able to continue to hang aerial fiber in all these locations, so then it becomes looking at having to do underground buried fiber to continue to expand. So, say that again, I'm sorry. So, Wi-Fi requires you to have a backbone network. It requires you to have that connectivity. So there's different ways you can get that. You can have an internet service provider provide you the connectivity you need, and we have done that in locations. Spectrum or WOW or somebody can set you up with a modem. put that camera on it. You pay a monthly fee. I think the biggest issue there is obviously it's not our network. We don't have control over the bandwidth, and depending on how many customers they have in the area, that bandwidth is shared, and it can be difficult to manage that video feed. What we're proposing is using our own network to bring that video feed back.
There's going to be some areas, some void areas, because you don't have the fiber, right?
Exactly, and that's what these projects are. We're looking for a way to fill those void areas and to get this coverage out to locations where we don't have it now. So the other project that we kind of identified as a very important underground expansion would be just to the west of I-65 and kind of make a loop from I-65 and Maxwell Boulevard, traveling past the Whitewater Park, past Maxwell Air Force Base, out to Birmingham Highway, and then back up Air Base and Day Street. It's a high traffic area and an entrance and exit to the west of town with a good bit of activity going on, and would cover a big area that we don't have any network coverage now. You guys want to expand any more? I think that's
it for phase one.
Okay? Yes, sir. Before you sit down, please. Now, do we have a twofold purpose here? Are we concerned about traffic management, or are we concerned about crime? And what is the primary objective?
Well, I think the primary objective is going to be the crime fighting aspect of this, that these guys can use this footage and can use devices in the field to help as a force multiplier for them, as an extra set of eyes. So obviously that's going to be priority number one. But yes, with this being a city network and it was originally established as a traffic network, we would absolutely use it for traffic management. This would allow us, like I said, especially that project to the west of town, we do not have connectivity there. And that's a pretty major entrance and exit into the city for traffic to the Prattville area. So it helps us to connect to our traffic signal controllers to be able to adjust timings and adjust what we need to. It allows us to have camera coverage to watch for incidents and watch for issues with backups that we may be able to address. So it's a multiplier for us too, with our technicians who have a traffic management center where we monitor the traffic. So yeah, absolutely, it's a big help for us as well.
So with that being said, I'm just wondering, I know the Department of Justice has millions of dollars to help with crime and management and other interventions that you all might deem appropriate to help manage crime. Have you all applied for any of those grants outside of this ARPA money? Because I'm just concerned that, that so many people want a portion of this money, and I'm afraid that it's not going to actually serve the long-term purpose that it was intended to, particularly in terms of addressing issues in underserved and minority communities. And I don't think we've addressed any of that yet. So I'm just wondering, have you all applied for any other grants so that we don't just have this money sliced up into too many pieces?
So we certainly applied for multiple grants throughout the time that we've created our intelligence center from 2019 forward. We have multiple grants that we've applied for and been granted that have been utilized to expand this network. However, as you'll see up here on this map, the west side of Montgomery is very devoid of coverage, partly because this has not been completed. So I think it goes directly to what you're saying, underserved communities. That's what we're trying to address, is these underserved communities haven't in the past been served by this camera network because we didn't have the infrastructure there to make that happen. And with this plan, we will be able to do that and address some of these areas where you see some of this violent crime happening, where currently we don't have any way to put up resources there outside of using third-party vendors.
I just like to see, in addition to the crime, and I know, I guess all of this is related actually, because when you have inadequate housing, some of that, the boarded up houses, the vacancy, the abandonment, has a direct correlation to crime. So hopefully we can get some help in terms of addressing those issues too that may be directly related to crime. I know I'm certainly concerned about the housing conditions, the boarded up, the abandonment and so forth. So we need to be talking about critical home repairs while we address crime as well.
And that's on the agenda today, Commissioner. Just for the interest of time, we want to try, I know y'all have a lot of questions, we want to try and save them to the end. And I also want to give Captain Richardson a chance to talk about the unincorporated parts of the county, that component of this, because the city and the county have been working collaboratively here to figure out how these enhancements can serve both of their objectives in law enforcement and deterring crime. So, Captain,
This is Chief Murphy.
Chief Murphy. I'm sorry. It's a long day. I'm sorry, Chief Murphy. My apologies. But if we could get the chief up here, I'm sorry.
No, would you let them know about Chantilly and the portal that's going to lead to Lake Road?
Will you slide that map over, show a little bit more of the eastern side of town? So once you get outside of the city and you're looking into the county, really, you've got a lot of activity east of the city limits into the Pike Road area. If you can tell on the big map up here, you can see where Chantilly Boulevard is in 85 at that interchange. We've got a purple dash line that's turning and coming down Chantilly. That's the extent of the fiber network currently. The end of that is at Chantilly and Ryan Road. So we've got another proposed project in green and yellow right there that would extend that fiber from Ryan Road down Chantilly to Vaughn Road and then over to Pike Road. And that allows the county to have coverage at a very busy area for them right there. Then obviously, you've got growth east of there, kind of south of there. So there's other opportunities, that we need to look at in that area to kind of expand eastward. ALDOT's going to be a part of this discussion. You've got Interstate 85 out there that they have a network on, and so there's an opportunity there maybe to partner with them to expand down the interstate and down the state routes to help out with the county.
And I know that Sheriff Cunningham has spoken to Chairman Dean as it relates to our needs with the Sheriff's Office and certainly the town of Pike Road, the population density, the calls for service, and crime is exponentially higher in this area of the county, obviously, than it is anywhere else. At times, 1/3 of the calls for service or 1/4 encompass in that area of the county. So having a camera system in that place with the density, calls, and crime would be the most advantageous.
All right, thank y'all so much. And again, we can have further discussions on this if anybody has any additional questions. And they can, you guys can look at those maps anytime you want to. They've got these maps available. And now we're going to talk about the Small Business Support Program. There's a one-pager behind you. You can probably listen to Mr. Washington first.
Good afternoon. I'm excited to share with you an update on the Small Business Support Program in partnership with the City of Montgomery, JSA Consulting, Levite, and the County of Montgomery. We've come up with a program that we call Access Montgomery. So how did we get here? Over the past 6 months, we've studied what have cities done around supporting small businesses as it relates to ARPA dollars. And what we know is this, we can't just throw money at the problem. A lot of cities have created funds that they use to distribute dollars to those small businesses that are most hardest hit. And although we are about 3 years away from when COVID first started, our small businesses are still suffering. All you need to do is go down any commercial corridor, you will see help wanted signs like they are part of a permanent fixture. You also see that businesses who have been able to survive, they're barely surviving, and a lot of them have never gotten back to even. So we came up with a program that we call Access Montgomery, and what we intend to do with this program is to create a radically different approach to supporting small businesses. We can offer capital through the Capital Access Fund, but we want to marry that with real resources that businesses need, whether they need access to technology, access to a more robust customer base, access to training, access to operation space. Businesses need spaces to operate. We're combining all of these efforts into not only a fund that will be managed by a sub-recipient, but an interconnected network of technical assistance providers. There are a lot of technical assistance providers for businesses out there. Our problem in Montgomery is most of them don't talk to each other. The problem is further exacerbated in that they don't always have a good means of talking to businesses who need them. So we're going to create an interconnected network where technical assistance providers can come together and create a one-stop shop. You'll hear that recurring theme because that's what businesses said that they need. They want to be able to make a call, whether they need business license help, whether they need help with the business plan, they can be transferred to the appropriate body that can assist them. And so at the end of the day, with this interconnected network, we feel that we will be able to achieve some very important outcomes. Mainly, we want to strengthen the credit of our small businesses. And we do this through education and not just giving them money. As PPP showed, we can give money out, but if there's not a plan to sustain these businesses going forward, they'll find themselves back in the same situation. We also, as I said, want to create a one-stop shop. We'll do that through an interconnected network of over about 30 different technical assistance providers. Some are at a national level, some at a regional level, that are all going to form together to make sure that we provide the assistance that businesses need. But then we're also going to establish a small business advisory council that will consist of small businesses and the county as well as the city getting together to help solve problems that are prevalent among small businesses. And we feel that if we are able to do this, we can sustain some of our small businesses, but more importantly, we can help them to grow to the next level, to pivot to new technology. And when we did our research, when we look at who will we serve as businesses with a business license in the city or county, we know that mostly about 60% of those businesses are minority businesses or women-owned. So we want to have a laser focus on those businesses. And then we know that 60% of those businesses are in distressed communities. So we went through about 6 months of putting together an RFP. We looked at what a lot of other cities have done, but then we modeled that RFP so that we can create the most bang for our buck here in Montgomery. And we came up with a sub-recipient that I'd like to introduce to you, Hope Enterprises. Sherry Lee? Hope is going to administer the Capital Access Fund, and Sherry Lee is going to tell a little bit about Hope Enterprises.
Thanks, Daryl. Hi, good afternoon. We're pleased to be here today and to have been selected as the sub-recipient. I know that's not final yet, but we're happy to have gotten this far. So Hope has been doing the kind of work Daryl just spoke about for almost 30 years now. And you probably have seen our credit unions around Montgomery, but we're based in 5 states in the Deep South, focused primarily in under-resourced communities of color. We've done programs just like this for about 30 years as well, with resources, federal resources, philanthropic resources. And so we do have expertise in doing that. And as Daryl said, one of the things that we think is really important is not just giving money away. It doesn't necessarily fix a problem, but to work with the small businesses so they have a relationship with their banker. They understand, they're financially literate, and moving forward, they will have the ultimate chance for success with their business.
And so the final component, one of the things that we find most effective is when you utilize ARPA dollars, you need to leverage those dollars to get dollars from other places. We've already been successful in receiving a grant from the National League of Cities to help us with the build out of our ecosystem. We've also been recognized by the National League of Cities with our approach around building an ecosystem to support small businesses. And furthermore, we want to also utilize about $760,000 of those dollars that will remain inside the county and the city so that we can provide the one-stop shop and enhance that one-stop shop through developing policies and practices. As municipalities, the number one tool that we have in our toolkit is effective policies and practices. How can we make our business license process better? How can we make our permitting operation better? And so we want to really focus in on those two areas as well. But we're super excited about Access Montgomery. We think it will bring some critical resources to businesses that are in dire straits and dire need of these services. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Okay, next we're going to go to critical home repair.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Clark. I'm the Executive Director of Central Alabama Regional Planning Commission, and we responded to your RFP on the critical repair. Central Alabama Regional Planning Commission has been serving our three-county region for right now this is our 55th year, and we have been involved with a lot of different housing initiatives and programs over the years. We have administered the Montgomery County's weatherization program since the mid-'80s. We have also, utilizing the state CDBG program, did several rehab projects within Montgomery County in the Eastwood Villa community, as well as in one of our other counties, Elmore County, as well as the town of Pike Road. We have looked at this program. It fits very well within our envelope, especially with our weatherization program. Under the weatherization program, we cannot assist someone if their home has a missing critical need, as a roof issue, electrical issue, plumbing issue. This will allow us to go back. We have on record, on file, how many cases? 86 people that we had to pass by on the weatherization program because their home did not meet the test. This will enable us to go back to these clients as well as bring them in immediately under this program to see if we can then, after we get their homes secured, we then can go back and look under our weatherization program and get them helping with their energy efficiency. So this is a double whammy for us in our different programs that we manage. Critical repair is basically looking at electrical, roofing, plumbing, as well as ADA issues in the home. I have with me Kay Gunnels with our energy program, as well as Leslie York, our grant manager. And I have some draft. We have been playing with some ideas of an application format, and I have some drafts. I will leave them so they'll pass them out to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to hear from Multimodal Trail Investments. There's a few slides behind you.
Yeah, there's a slideshow. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for allowing me the time to present to you. I am Will O'Connor, the Executive Director of River Region Trails, and I am presenting some additional information on the requested allocation of funding for multimodal trail development. John is passing out a few pages that will be helpful, but I'll go ahead and get started. I hope you all are already familiar with this project. I know we've talked about it quite a bit. I will go through just a brief overview just to remind everyone. May I see the next slide, please? So just very quickly, when we talk about trails, we are not talking about natural surface trails through the woods, enclosed within parks. What we are talking about is a primarily paved, multi-use network that connects people to places. So this is to be used, yes, by walkers and cyclists, but also by scooters, which have just been introduced to the city. Wheelchairs, scooters, strollers, any sort of active transportation. What we are proposing to build is a network that allows safe transportation via automobile alternatives. So, next slide, please. This project was not created by River Region Trails. It was primarily informed by the Envision Montgomery 2040 comprehensive plan. The Envision 2040 defines greenways as linear corridors of open space, including a trail system. These linear parks can provide access to larger areas of the city than traditional parks can, and also provide an alternative transportation through the community. Greenways can increase property value, have a tourism component, public health improvements, and also provide flood mitigation. That information is directly from Envision 2040. As a reminder, that comprehensive plan took almost 2 years to create and included comments from more than 4,000 comments from more than 1,000 citizens, and was led by a steering committee that included a number of you all that are sitting before me here today. So I hope that you'll remember Envision 2040 calls for trails and greenways more than 75 times in that plan. So we are now responding to that call, as well as the information in the Walk Bike River Region plan prepared by the MPO and the Downtown Action Plan. We've combined all of that into a master plan for this trail network. Next slide, please. What I've put before you today includes some of this same information, but prior to our master plan, we conducted an economic impact analysis, and that identified an $18.3 million economic benefit annually if we are able to build 85 miles of trail. So doing some quick math, that's a very short payback in this investment. There are a number of other reasons why we should do this. It touches on a lot of different categories. The Envision 2040 plan identified 10 categories that trails have a positive impact on, including preserving our historic spaces, connecting our community, moving people to the places they need to be, and improving our health through the built environment. So, as I said, we've already conducted an impact study, and we've already completed a master plan.
Can we ask questions now, or we'll wait to the end?
We were trying to wait to the end. We only have one more presentation, which will be super short.
And I will speed up. Try not to take all your time. Skip to the next slide, please. So our next step is working alongside our partners at the city and county to begin implementation. This is the information that you guys have not seen yet. This is the breakdown of the proposed allocation into projects that were identified as priority projects through the planning process. So the planning process identified 5 catalyst projects based on a number of prioritization characteristics. We are proposing to fund 4 of those projects through this allocation, not a complete funding of any of them, just a start, just a spark for each project. And then we've also added a category for quick impact projects. And what those are projects that don't require a long-term design, acquisition, engineering phase. And I'd like to work with each of you to identify a project in your district that would be able to provide an immediate impact while also contributing to the overall network. And that could be something like improving an existing park or trail, doing placemaking like pop-up parks and murals, doing a pop-up trail, transportation improvements such as crosswalks. These types of components that we know are desperately needed in some areas can be included in these quick impact projects. So with that, I would just encourage you all to consider this allocation. With this work, we can get started. The planning work is done, and we just need the spark to begin. And I'd like to end by reminding you, one of the things that we discovered in our work is that 7% of households in the Montgomery metropolitan area don't have access to a vehicle. 36% of households have access to only one vehicle. So by doing this work, we can begin to improve the quality of life for those households by allowing them to get to the places that they need to be. That is a health benefit, that's an economic benefit, that's just the right thing to do. So with that, I will, I guess, delay any questions until the next presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And the last one is me, so let me go up there. This is really just an update and also partially a cautionary tale. You know, we've been talking about obligating, allocating and obligating this money and the deadlines that we have and the semi-urgency that we need to move. And this is an example of that. So the Hospital Violence Interruption Program, we put out an RFP in December, extended the deadlines until January. We had some vendors respond, but not very many. And then we did risk assessments on those vendors and interviewed vendors at the end of February and came to the conclusion that we did not have a qualified vendor, that we did not have a vendor that could handle, that had handled federal money in the past at this level, and that we just couldn't in good conscience recommend the vendor. So we have to sort of regroup on this project. And so we have some updates on how we're doing that. So the main problem with hospital violence interruption programs is that the local component is hard to develop and is mostly not present in a lot of cities. So there are lots of companies and nonprofits and organizations at the national level that will do technical assistance training and to design your program. So that's not the problem. We can get a national group, we can put out an RFP and get a national group to do that. The reason they won't take on the whole project, the reason that we didn't have any national companies bid on the whole project is because they don't have the ability to implement the local part of the program. So we're kicking around a secondary solution. We have a technical assistance call with the Health Alliance for Violence Interruption on Monday. So a lot of us are going to be on the call that we're kind of working on this. Folks from Baptist, folks at the county, city, and Director Moore from the Office of Violence Prevention. We're all going to be on a call and we're going to kind of talk through what an RFP would look like for that national organization to come in and design our program. The other thing that's been suggested is that we build through contracts in the Office of Violence Prevention, the local part of this program. So instead of, trying to create a nonprofit or to take a nonprofit that really hasn't done this before and doesn't have the, the track record, we can contract out of the Office of Violence Prevention for trusted communicators and violence interrupters. They would not be employees of the city, but they would be contracted through the Office of Violence Prevention, and that office would manage the local component. So that does two things. You get a good design and build from the national organization, and then you get a local component that is managed in the Office of Violence Prevention. That can expand if people want to keep the program after the ARPA money is done, or it can contract after the ARPA money is done. Yes, sir.
I'm having trouble envisioning this program. Roughly, how would the program work, and what are some of the skills that...
Certainly. So,
can you hear me?
Yes, I could. So the way these programs work, and they've been implemented since the early 2000s, they're evidence-based and they do reduce violence. So what happens is when someone is at the hospital is just kind of like a place of intake. So it could be a different part of the community. It doesn't have to be the hospital, but the hospital has proven to be a very good intake.
In my mind, it's emergency room violence. It's the kind of violence that occurs when somebody's in the nursing. When somebody comes to the nursing room to finish off the job they started.
Correct.
That's what's
Correct.
coming in. And
Correct.
That's what I had in mind when I.
That's absolutely
what we
right,
wanted to address. So
Commissioner.
how do we handle that?
So it's a part of, so evidence has shown that when people are are victims of a violent crime, or they've been engaged in some, retaliatory violence, when they're at the hospital, they're a lot more vulnerable and willing to make changes in their life, right? So when you have a trusted communicator or a community interventionist, that person has also either experienced violence themselves, or was part of a gang, or is somebody that can say, "Hey, I've been there, fella. Let's do something else. Let's change your life." And so this program provides the funding to do the wraparound services for that family, to prevent them from retaliating at that point. So we know that 48% of all gun violence is retaliatory, that if you are involved in gun violence, that there is there's a 50% chance that you will be involved in another gun violent activity.
And so what about the violence that's occurring in the emergency room itself?
Yeah, that's a problem. When we talked to Baptist Hospital, I asked them, what violence prevention programs do you have? And he said, well, I got a couple of 25-year-old nurses down there that are kind of holding people apart. It's not sufficient. And so Baptist Hospital is very, open and excited about this program. They have some social workers on premises, but they don't have anything in terms of hospital violence interruption program. But they're very excited about this one.
Let me intervene, please, Susan. Commissioner, and those that are still kind of on the fence or not understanding this piece, what this is the hospital interrupters. They come in and they follow that violence from the street to the hospital, back home. So the first 72 hours after a crime is committed, you have family members, friends that are hostile in the moment. They're ready to retaliate. But the interrupter are coming in, and they're on the scene with the family, calming them down, finding out, and they're not from a place outside of the city. This is someone they know, someone they can trust. And so this is us building a relationship in-house. So I wanted to come back to what you said, Susan. You all were looking for somebody that was national. When I just came back from D.C., who we spoke to was someone, he had an opportunity to speak to us, and he was directly with the COPS office and with the U.S. Department of Justice. Hugh Clements, he's the director. And he actually came from the force, retired, and headed up this office for the president. And what he stated was when he was in Boston, he used this program in interrupters, and it went from a 25% change in the crime and decreasing it to a 35% to a jump of 53% after 3 years of using this. They have the program already established. It's nothing that we have to recreate or get someone to do for us. We can just communicate with that office, grab what they have and save our dollars, and actually hire people from the community. This isn't somebody with a bachelor's degree. This is somebody with a street degree that needs to come in that Office of Violence and Prevention and be on the streets because they're from the streets and they understand the streets, and giving them a salary that can still provide for them, but they're keeping our streets safe, and they're working for home. They're working for our area that they know, and they want to change too. They've recently started coming out on these Stop the Violence walks. I happen to miss the one in Chisholm, but I would say, I think Rotary has told me about 5 gentlemen from a barbershop. The barbershop closed, and the guys were reformed from the streets, still connected to the streets. He cut all their hair, and he went on his walk and brought guys with him. That's who we need. We don't need somebody that specializes in anything but the streets to come on as a contractor for these positions. This is what we need to look for. And I think that's ideally what myself and Councilor Mitchell were looking for when we mentioned this program. It wasn't for us to hire anybody outside, because nobody can tell us how to patrol and police Montgomery but us. So that's what we're looking for. And so I want us to have an idea of when you all are looking for what you're looking for to secure this contract, that's what we're looking for as a council and commission, because we want to clean up the streets of Montgomery. And the only people can do that are the ones that's heading up the crime and coming back from crime. So we don't want to look outside. We want to look right here. So that's putting, the RFP looks like Keith Moore putting out a position, about 12 of them, and working with MPS and putting about 12 of them in each one of our schools, like separating them, because MPS is ready to jump on board. This is us partnering together in-house, in city. Thank you.
Can I, Susan, if I may, and ultimately this is you guys' decision to make, and I hear you 100%, Counselor. I think that there is value in having those national partners come design that program and how the program will function. And the way they're supposed to work is they come in for a year, they put the protocols in place, they make sure that your local credible messengers and interrupters have the training that they need, that they know how to go into a situation where a family is highly emotional and they know the right things to say. Because even though they have that street smarts, they don't have that technical expertise to deal with those high emotionally intense situations. When these programs function well, the national partner comes in for 6 months, 8 months. They're not here forever.
Right.
They design it in a way so that when they leave, the Office of Violence Prevention and these credible, local credible messengers that are paid, they know exactly what to do. So, I mean, again, if that expertise already exists in the city and the county, then there would be no need to go out and get a national partner. But as you said, the model is already here, so we're not creating it. It's just making sure that we got our spokes on the wheel tight so we can keep rolling. And that, again, that's you all's decision to make.
And I would also say this, these community interventionists, some of them have been killed.
Yeah, I
Like,
know.
this is not a job that, you know, is much different from a police officer.
Right.
You know, it's you put your life on the line every day when you go into these communities and try to do this work. And so our purpose in getting the national organization is to make sure that when we ask people to do this work, that we have the latest training and the best technical assistance that we can have. And like Terry says, when you're asking somebody to put their life at risk for the benefit of the community, we need to have, you know, we need to provide those people with all the resources that we are able to, I think.
Yeah,
So that's why we have that. They won't be here forever. In fact, you know, we started this because the Jefferson County Health Department had one, and they had shown some real exceptional results with their program. They started with a national organization, but now they have passed that off completely to an organization that's local in the community up there. So that we don't expect that this is somebody we just hire out or outsource violence to. That's not what we're trying to do, but we are trying to make sure that if we ask our community members to come into these dangerous situations and potentially lose their lives, that we've given them every resource.
Right. Now, Susan, Terry, if I'm not mistaken, Keith, I see you back there. There's an organization that's in New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey, which is, I want to say, is that where it started, Keith? Where they came down twice to give them training. Where I don't know if that is a cost for us because we're under the Office of Violence and Prevention, but I'm really curious on if there a way that Keith could get with you all and connect with the COPS office at the federal level and the National Office of Violence and Prevention and get the Newark team. They were willing to come back to us. And so if they're setting up training so they can do some one-on-ones, travel back up to Newark as a team and get that training that they need. Because I do agree, they do these emotional intelligence training, you know, technical, but these offices offer that. So if there's a way that we can go through these offices and use that just to save our dollars because we know that it exists.
That's right. We have a no-cost call on Monday.
Okay.
Then they're willing to help us with one of the national organizations, and there may be more, but you know, we'll have more of a sense about what we need, you know, after that call.
Okay, thank you.
Susan, before you sit down, please.
Yes, sir.
I know most of the things we've discussed today are somewhat related to health and wellness, whether it's crime or whatever the case may be. But I wanted to know, housing, of course, and I keep saying that, has a direct correlation to health and wellness. If you have inadequate housing, then there's going to be some health disparities associated with that. And so I'm just wondering, it seems like we keep decreasing the amount of funds that we're going to put toward critical housing repair. The last time I looked at it, it was $3 million. Now it's $2,500,000. Who had some conversation about that?
I just don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Are you talking about critical home
Critical
repairs?
home repair. Critical home repair. I see, and it's still in red. So
That's because it's not obligated yet.
And it's not necessary, and we'll talk about that. That's, to your point, Commissioner, that's
Yes,
a
ma'am.
discussion that's a little later on the agenda. If you could give us a minute to get to that component.
I
And
will.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
I think I have the answer to
are
that.
we going to talk about Montgomery Thrive Fund, the $2,750,000?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I'm gonna sit down on hospital violence interruption and let y'all ask any of the other folks that presented earlier.
And while Susan's sitting and y'all are thinking of your questions, I do want to add that a sister component to hospital violence intervention, in phase 2, you also allocated funding for violent crime prevention, and Councilor Mitchell called together a group of agency leaders, and they've started kind of building the framework of a youth reentry program, which works very well in partnership with hospital-based violence intervention programming. And so they will have another meeting in April with a goal of getting you a tight framework. The framework really started coming together after that first meeting, but I know there's been a lot of emphasis in our discussions about the bipartisan infrastructure law and how this money could be used to help you guys leverage those opportunities. I want to make sure y'all are also aware of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which is the same thing almost as the infrastructure law, but for public safety. There is an open grant opportunity right now with OJA for community-based violence intervention where you could apply for technical assistance all the way up to program expansion. And that program is funded through fiscal year 2026. So as y'all are looking for those opportunities to take this one-time funding and grow it, we want to make sure that you're matching it with these other federal funding pots that are in some cases funded double what they're typically funded right now for the next few years, and public safety is one of those as well.
Terry, Terry, I got a question. Can we, some of that funding for police, can we use some of that on cameras?
Yes,
Okay.
there's an open opportunity on cameras right now.
Okay.
I've got a whole list of it. We're happy to send it to all of you guys. It's very comprehensive, so it's like a list of 350 federal grant opportunities, and you can sort through those. Actually, what I would rather do is send it to Ms. Porter and Ms. Walker at the city and county and let them filter that to you. I have a feeling when you see it, your eyes might cross a little bit. But we'll get that over to them and let them give that to you. So there ain't going back, and I did not mean to deter us. Are there questions from any of our potential vendors? And I do want to make it clear there are no agreements in place with any of these vendors at this point. There are conditional awards in place with small business and critical home repair. So the RFP for homelessness could go out with your approval, but we thought it was important to give you guys a chance to hear about these programs and share your feedback before we go further down the road. But they are here to answer your questions.
Yeah, Mr. O'Connor, on the trails, can you come up for one second? I've got a couple of questions. I'm very interested when it comes to generating revenue, because we have so many great programs here that we have listed, but these programs are going to require sustainability after the ARPA money is gone, and that sustainability will have to come from city and county budgets. So I'm very interested in having some facets of this that would generate revenue. I see the 1.24 million in health benefits. I get that, okay, because I understand that. But can you help me a little bit with the 14.5 in economic benefits and where that comes from? Is that coming from people visiting Montgomery, staying in hotels because they want to use the trails? Can you elaborate on that a little bit for me?
I can. It's got a couple different components. There is a direct visitor component. There's a mass of data showing that trails stand alone as a visitor attraction. But then there's also the secondary component that trails tend to attract businesses, particularly small businesses. And so what you're effectively doing is creating a place for businesses to be where people also want to be. And so then that gives you a small business development or potentially a large business development potential. Same thing goes for housing. The science is telling us from the National Association of Realtors that access to the outdoors is the #1 criteria currently in looking for a new home. So that economic number is one encapsulated number that includes 4 or 5 different categories. I have that breakdown for you in a real dense report that I'd be happy to share.
And then on the 4.2 million in tax revenue, can you help me a little bit? If you're generating 14.5.
That's spending from visitors.
Spending from visitors.
Spending on particularly food and
So that's 4.2 million that will be taxed.
yes.
That's not 4.2 million in tax revenue for the city, state, and county then.
It would, I believe, if I'm not certain, but I believe that number is the estimated tax that would be received from additional sales in the city based on the amount of visitors projected.
And Doug, I mean, you bring up a good question, but if you look at cities like Macon, Georgia, for example, with their Trails Network, has been able to do, or a larger Trails Network in Atlanta, the Beltline, or even New York, the Highline, we're none of those places. However, this economic model, the bubble that you're looking at, is the entire trail that is built out. All the mileage that connects the city, in addition to when you look at cities like Macon, Georgia, or the New York High Line and Beltline, each property, everywhere where that trail goes that connects the whole city, those property values go up, so you're paying more in property taxes.
Okay, that's
but
what
you're
I was
also
asking.
getting more,
Yeah.
because it's rising tide floats all boats.
That's what I was looking for, Clay, because, you know, I'm just taking general mathematics, 14.5 million is, at 10% is 1.45 million.
Right.
So that's what I
Additional
want you-
property
And
taxes.
you make a good point.
So I have the details on the economic study. It kind of
That's
tells
fine.
you.
You answered my question.
Okay.
That was the ones I had, and again, I'm very big on generating revenue because I want to help all these nonprofits. I want to help all these programs. It's going to be great. Well, I want to be able to sustain them. If, for example, we do the hospital intervention and it works and it's doing great work and it's helped prevent violence, what are we going to do when the money runs out? We can't stop it.
Right.
You know, there's no way as elected officials we're going to be able to say, well, hey, this is, you know, cut violent crime 28%. So all of a sudden we're going to say, well, the money's out. Sorry, you're done. We won't do that, as everybody knows. So again, I'm looking for some ways, not all, but looking at some ways, some facets of this to the revenue generating money.
There's another stat you'll be interested in. This is a projection, of course. It's based on Montgomery's population and Montgomery's projected project. But there's another stat nationwide on existing, already built projects. As an average nationwide, trail projects generate $1.70 for every dollar invested in trail
Yeah, that's
projects.
the turnover. Yeah, I've seen.
So,
those.
I mean, but that's on existing and already studied projects.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
exactly.
you
That's where
know,
people will spend $1 and then whoever gets $1 spends it again.
well, I'm saying that every dollar you spend on the trail, on building the trail,
Oh, okay.
that's the,
$10 million in investment would equal $17 million in return. Right. So,
Yeah, well,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you for answering. That was just a couple.
I've got a question. Have we started negotiating on the Jackson cut yet? Susan, Terry?
We don't have any direction on that, but if that's something that you guys wanted to start first, then, you know, we can get a resolution and start working on that.
I can just tell you, I've maintained a contact with them, but without any funding, I have not attempted.
Well, see, we know we could, Ms. People, can't we use some of our money to buy that? The Jackson Hospital cut to convert it to trail. Well, I don't know now. I'm asking. Yeah.
Well, I got one more question. There's about 20 miles on this sheet here, back and forth. And you'd mentioned 85. Is the master plan, the overall goal is to have 85 miles of trail in Montgomery? And I know it goes through Pike Road too, and the county too. This is 20 miles of it, so you're saying 5 million will get this 20 miles done?
No, sir.
5 million will help you go for grants that will, so how much would this, is there an estimate on what this on these front and back page would final number would be?
Would cost on those front and back, that estimate's about 30 million.
Okay. So to do these 20 miles, it'd be about 30 million.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, I think at first when we started talking about this, it was gonna be like 50 million to do it. Of course, now everything's going up.
Yeah.
I get it, okay.
We
definitely get that.
ballpark, generally ballpark about $1 million a mile.
Mile.
There's a lot of variation in that. The urban center tends to be more expensive, but also tends to be the higher impact for putting a trail. On the rural edges, cheaper and easier to produce the product, but also impacts less people. So there's balance there. But to answer your question, the 85 miles is what is the projection that we used to do the economic impact report.
And that was like the whole loop, wasn't it?
It was a decent, it was the loop plus some additional. The master plan further identified another about 70 miles of potential, but that's 156 miles total that was studied. We're not projecting that that's what needs to be built. That just gives you the options, and then we then pared all of those miles down into priorities.
Thank you, Will, appreciate that.
Will,
Yeah.
the Kershaw Rail with Trail, is that similar to the Jackson Cut?
A similar characteristic, except that what we would be working with is just an easement on that property rather than needing to purchase it, which you see the dollar amount's much less for a longer project. That is a privately owned piece of property, and the owner is interested in potentially giving or selling us an easement to put a trail alongside the railroad. It's a different character of trail, so it's much or significantly less expensive to build on that piece of property than it would be on the Jackson Cut.
Okay.
So, Will,
Bridges, y'all got estimated you'd have to make there? Everywhere the railroad has a bridge, you'd have to have a bridge, correct?
Depends on which project you're talking about. On the Kershaw, yes,
Kershaw.
everywhere the railroad is bridged, we would have to have an additional bridge.
Okay.
On the Jackson Cut, we would use the existing bridge because it's a rail trail conversion.
Right. Well, Susan and Terry, I don't know where the rest of them stand, but I would like for us to negotiate with the Jackson property. I think that's a great starting point. It's either 3.2 or 2.2. I see is it 3.2?
It's depends on where you want to stop it. If you stop it at Jackson Hospital, it's 2.2 miles from the stadium, from Biscuit Stadium to Jackson Hospital.
I mean, I think that's a good starting point. That's just my thought.
So we can be empowered to go out and try to figure out what they want for that property. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I think
That's
we
what
can
I'm
do that.
asking. I don't know the
I
rest
think
of
we
it.
can, I
Yes.
think we can do that under the existing resolution that we have, which is to check out trails and see what to do. So I think we can do that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good start. We've already kind of decided that we would use, I think, Clay, were you in agreement with that, to use our funds to purchase it? And then we could come back with the ARPA dollars to actually do the design work.
Gotcha.
Another one, I had a question, Will, I know we talked about it a little bit, but there was a few questions about with our Cypress. No, that's something I'm really interested in doing, but I know we talked about maybe releasing it to the state, because the problem and the question is, of course, like I stated, it was the maintaining it after we're done, like the personnel. So would that be something we're gonna release out to the state after you're done? Or did you have any ideas about capacity to maintain it?
We've put together a couple of different scenarios of how that project could be developed and operated. There are a variety of options from a private developer and a private operator to a city component, state opportunity. It can be a partnership. But to be clear, the city owns the majority of the property for that project. There's about 30 acres of private property that would be included. River Ridge and Trails is not currently empowered to develop that project. So what we have done, what we were empowered to do is figure out a recommendation. And so and we've had a meeting already with some of the city staff, and we've got another one scheduled to talk about some of the possibilities and then put it together into a proposal.
Okay.
Will, do you currently have a paid staff or an operating budget to take you forward in this work that you're doing with River Region?
I am the singular paid staff at the moment.
And what's your source of funding currently?
It's currently privately fundraising.
And we're not proposing, I love Will, but I'm not sure he'd pass the risk assessment, not because he's a bad guy, but because this is a whole lot of money, right? Yes. And so we would probably, Terry and I are still talking through this, but if you guys go forward with trails, we would probably put it in the county and the city parks department, and then try to work through contracting it out through that.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to explain, I am not presenting as a vendor in this particular scenario. I'm more of a capacity addition to the city staff and the county staff in working on these projects. So I am a private partner.
Yeah, one additional question, and I know I've talked to you about this before, and I don't know if the answer has changed. I know Councilman McKinnis, again, has talked about property tax increase as the economic development portion of this was being discussed. Now, a lot of these trails, particularly Cypress Park, runs through communities that I represent along with Councilwoman Johnson. And I'm concerned about the property taxes increase that might come with developing these properties within these communities. And gentrification is always a word that comes up when you start talking about trails. Are you concerned that we might be pushing some of the folks out of these communities once these trails are developed?
So you said gentrification, and then you clarified it. I would have said displacement is the concern. I don't think so. Based on the work we've done so far, particularly with the Cypress Preserve project, the communities surrounding it are asking for it. They're aware of it, they want it, and the key to preventing displacement is knowledge and education of the project. A lot of times what happens is a developer comes in, offers, what looks like an attractive price to buy properties because the developer knows something that the neighborhood doesn't. So the number one thing that we can do is make sure that the neighborhood knows everything that anybody else can know about what's going to happen and what that means for their neighborhood. We've done some work. I think there's probably some more to do, and there's a need for potentially some support from the community and neighborhoods departments. But we have done some work to plan to address those risks already.
And Commissioner, I just want to state that by no means would I support this if it would be displacing our community members, because as you know, it's from where both of us come from. And I know first time I talked to Will, this was our initial conversation, very first conversation we had about displacement or pushing community members out. So the first thing we did was we went to King Hill and had a community meeting, and they all came from Charlestown, Newtown, King Hill, and even parts of Highland Gardens. We went to Highland Gardens, same thing. He came and spoke to Newtown, and he's had open conversations with the neighborhood associations. So they know what's going on. I make sure that they're aware. They're actually excited more than anything about the upgrades that'll happen in the area. But I think the key to this is it'll improve our area. So of course it will increase property value more than anything. We haven't had a property increase in North Montgomery that I know of for about 30 years. So I would hope that this wouldn't bring a tax assessment to our area that I think that you all control at the commission, correct?
Well, there's no anticipated tax increase. No. The only increase would be an increase in property value, which leads to an increase in taxes if you're paying taxes.
Yeah, well, sir, we hadn't had any reason to have an increase up to this point.
Well, I tell you what,
this doesn't create a reason.
If you could promise me to increase my property value, which increase my property tax, run it right through my house.
It's the chicken or the egg.
I can promise you that the data shows that it does increase property values. The trail, the park is a little bit of a different entity, but the trail alone is about 5%.
Thank you, Will. Listen. Yeah.
There other
What's
questions?
that? But I mean, yeah.
Yeah, we need other questions for other people too, I'm sure.
No more questions. Okay. Across any other programs, no more questions?
I do have about the critical home repair.
Go for it.
I have about the critical home repair.
Mr. Clark.
question for you. Hi, how are you doing? So you said you currently had 81 already on your list?
I think it's more like 86.
Okay. So my question is this: how much with that $2 million? How far do you think that $2 million that we're trying to give you? How far do you think you would go since you currently have that many on your list? Because I'm wanting to ensure that our unincorporated part of Montgomery County is taken care of as well as the city of Montgomery.
Well, those 86 are throughout the entire county.
I'm sorry.
The
Can you come up
86
to the
are
mic?
throughout the entire
I
county.
can't come up just a little. I didn't hear you.
The 86 that I do have currently are throughout the
Throughout
entire
Montgomery.
county.
Okay. Also, as far as Ada, Raymer, all of those places.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. And so, what do you think the $2 million? How far do you think once you do? But you already have 80 something on the list, right?
Yeah, we say that again.
Did you not say you had a list with 80 homes already on there?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were going to incorporate that with the $2 million that we're giving you, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And then if we are allowed to do those homes, then I can add additional roughly 10,000 of federal funds for the weatherization program to those homes later.
Okay.
Mayor Reed, you know, we had just met late yesterday afternoon in Washington on energy. You arranged that meeting. Can you share a little bit about the excitement we left from leaving that meeting, especially what weatherization of critical home repair, low-income houses?
Yeah, first, good afternoon, everybody, to City Council and County Commission that are here, Terry and Susan, thank you all for the work as well as the public for being here. We had a very, very productive, very busy back-to-back meeting with our senators and congressional delegation. But as part of that yesterday, we wanted to make sure that we reached out and touched several agencies that have grant initiatives on the table, some of which I think we've already been applying for, and others which we are certainly interested in learning more about. And what Chairman Singleton is mentioning is the Department of Energy. One of the big areas that we know there's billions of dollars that cities have not claimed is as it relates to weatherization of homes, making homes more energy efficient, as well as buildings themselves across communities. And what we got from the Department of Energy was a lot of interest in working with our city, working with our staff and our county to really bring more funding through the states, through certified nonprofits, so that the resources can get to the people that need them the most. And there's a ambitious goal by this administration through the Department of Energy to achieve a more green, I don't want to just say economy, but to realize more energy efficient practices throughout, and to really utilize even green jobs training or training for green jobs as a part of that will be supported through apprenticeships and other initiatives. But we really started the conversation off around how do we help people who are in older homes cut their heating bills, cut their power bills. How do we help them do the simple things? And what resources are out there to help them in these programs, and what do we have to do to better position ourselves to help our residents here in the city of Montgomery and Montgomery County. And we just got, I think, a great overview, and we got some great pointers on what we need to do to follow up. And I volunteered, where is Mr. Eddie Compton? Raise your hand, Eddie. You got volunteered yesterday, you didn't know it, at the Department of Energy to lead this on behalf of the city and working with a county partner that they may have on their staff, so that we can really bring the billions of dollars out of the sky, if you will, and onto the ground right here to the residents of the city of Montgomery and our county.
And there's a lot of money that's coming down. It just hasn't made its way from the state to the program.
Hence why I said out of the sky. And that was our thing to the feds, where it does us no good for people to hear that there are billions of dollars out there and that the state has millions of dollars, and that even the city and county has access to it, if they can't reach it, if it can't get to their pockets, help them cut their bills. And so what we want to do is to reduce the red tape and then make sure that we're making it clean and plain for how our residents can benefit from it. Because it's not a matter of if the resources are there, it's a matter of how we can utilize the resources to put them on the ground into the hands and into the households of people that need them. And last thing I will say, Chairman, is that they mentioned that several census tracts in the city of Montgomery in particular would directly qualify for assistance because of the poverty numbers that we have here. So people are struggling. We ought to be able to help them in a much more efficient manner. We just now have to take the follow-up steps in that regard from our side.
I just want to make sure we're answering the Commissioner's question. Excuse me, I can't remember if it was 2 or 2.5, but are you guys saying that the entirety of that amount would be used to do critical home repair for those homes that are currently ineligible for weatherization, or would you be able to do those plus additional homes? And if so, and I recognize this may not be an entirely fair question, but can you give the body a general sense of how many homes you think you could potentially repair over the life of this program if you got this $2.5 million allocation? Very generally speaking.
Well, that will be really sort of difficult to the fact that each home
Sure.
is individually different based upon the needs within that home and the cost of the repair on each one. Now, if you take what the RFP told us, that the maximum value that can go in the home is only $25,000 per unit. If you take that number and look at the amount of money that is offered on the program, you'll be able to see. And answer to your other question is that we know that we have these many individuals that under the homes that we had to pass before under our weatherization program. But we have not gone back in those files yet to determine if the homeowner is still living. If the homeowner is still wanting assistance, or even if the home is still standing. So there is some issues that we will have to go back to, and yes, it is a whole application process. The way we do our weatherization and also the way we want to do this is basically a first come, first serve initiative. We were just saying that we know of some potential applicants already. We're not saying we're going to push them ahead of, it's first come, first serve. And if I made you think that we're going to start there, that was my bad. It's because it's open, we want it to be a fair, open system for everyone in the city and the county that is eligible to have access to the money.
Thank you. That answers the question.
Thank you. Sir, you got a couple of questions down here. I'm sorry, I came in right when you all were sitting down. What is the name of your organization?
Central Alabama Regional Planning and Development Commission, or CARPDEC for short.
CARPDEC. Okay, so do you operate off county or state funds already?
We are a creature of the state, but we are work based off of membership from our member governments that support us in the Autauga, Elmore, Montgomery counties, as well as we get state assistance, and we also get some federal assistance through our economic development efforts.
Okay, and it's just me because I kind of got a little bit of it, and I said, well, I have some questions. So when you talk about weatherization, are you the program that's currently supporting the state weatherization program that we use through community action? You are.
Our community action agency here did not choose to, Montgomery County did not choose to do the program.
Okay.
The Montgomery County took up the weatherization program for the county, and they contract with us to administer it for Montgomery County.
And my last question, will you be applying for the ADECA funds that are currently at the state right now? And it's about $55 million that just recently got released for negative impact. will that be dollars that you'll be applying for? Because I know $2.5 million won't do it for not even the 86 properties that, or families that you need to support.
Yes, under the build program, there's, money has already been allocated to the state of Alabama, and it's been broken up already into the current divisions. We are now waiting on ADECA to finish their rules and their policies and get that approved by the Energy Department. We are, sadly to say, they're a year late. And we've been waiting a year for ADECA to get everything moved.
I got one question. It's a little bit, kind of a little technical. When you, on these weatherizations or energy efficient stuff, is windows the big winner? Is replacing windows with energy efficient windows or not?
No, sir. The old weatherization was usually used to be called a door and window replacement program.
Okay.
But no, actually we do a very scientific measurements when we go in the home. We do pressurization tests, look at where the leakages are occurring. We
so you got an infrared camera?
Yes. We look at insulation. We look at all energy modeling, and then we put all this data into a computer program, and it basically helps kick out what elements we can do for this house.
So you're telling you take these old and you do a blower door test? That's what it used to be called. Is it still called that? So that's what y'all do on these older homes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terry, Susan, question. I know this is only a piece of what we were looking for the critical home repair. Are we still, is that RFP still open for other organizations to apply to mitigate blight?
So, yeah, so this is just for critical home repair. There's, and now I'm going to answer Commissioner Sankey's question real quick, now I'll come back to yours.
Okay.
The reason it was 3 million before and it's 2.5 here is because there's 500,000 that's carved out for a septic replacement program, countywide septic replacement. So that's why that, and that's separate from this. We were advised not to do critical home repair and septic together. So that we've talked with Alabama Department of Public Health on that, Counselor and Commissioner, and we have a draft RFP that we're just trying to tighten up for Montgomery. And then when we go to our next item on the agenda, we'll talk about there's still some community restoration money out there for blight. Susan has been working with Kippy and talking with others to kind of get a sense of what the needs are outside of that $4 million that was allocated from the Congresswoman's office. So that's, you know, we didn't want to do everything all at once because it's kind of a quality control issue, right? We want to make sure these programs are stood up in a way that will work. But that's definitely on the radar, and those conversations have started. Does that answer your
Yes, ma'am.
$3 million question?
Ma'am, can you come to the mic so we can hear you?
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thanks.
So if you're setting that amount of money aside for the septic work, does that mean you don't want to include it in the critical home repair?
Well, I think we would like to have those discussions with you guys to see what we can do. I mean, it could be, you know, we've seen models of critical home repairs where septic replacement was included and where it was not. Some folks take the idea that the septic is not in the home, and so they don't want to do it. Others have done it separately. So I think as we negotiate this award, that's something that we need to discuss with you guys.
Because that could be a big component of your critical home repair.
Yes,
your health and
absolutely.
safety issue is getting your system
Well,
operating.
then that sounds like that's on the agenda for one of our many follow-up conversations as we negotiate this agreement. Are there other questions from any of the presenters? We want to be mindful of your time, but we've got some very important things.
Please, and I don't want to delay it unnecessarily. Mr. Compton, Eddie Compton, just a question, please, sir, if it's okay. You talked about the homeless initiative and interventions that you all had in mind. And I know that there's about 20,000 veterans here in Montgomery County, if the number is correct, if I remember it correctly. And I know that the veterans also, and I'm not suggesting that you're excluding veterans, but they have mental health issues, substance abuse issues, workforce development is part of things that we're trying to do. And so I'm wondering, would you be open to working with veteran groups? I know that Commander Fred Williams is here. He's done a lot of work with veterans throughout this county. He continues to do that. He continues to do that type of work. And he was talking about a one-stop veteran service center. And it seems like it would go hand in hand with the one-stop center for the homeless population, with the veterans also being part of that population. So I'm just wondering if you would be open to working with Commander Williams, and if you all have had some conversations.
As a matter of fact, we have, yes, and I assisted them with writing the Alabama Resource, I guess, consolidation plan that they've written already. So yes, I've been working with them also, and they are eligible to apply for this funding as well.
Yes, but that could be a joint venture, perhaps.
Exactly.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions?
I got one, and I apologize I wasn't here, Wesley. On the cameras, the 4.6, expanding the cameras, is that some of the circuit we've been talking about for the last 4 or 5 months, that same route, that trying to put fiber and stuff where we don't currently have fiber? Is that what the 4.6 million is for?
Right, we talked about, you and I have discussed the aerial fiber locations.
Right.
Where we can go on the Alabama Power poles. Those are included. Primarily Fairview Avenue, Norman Bridge Road, that area. Dalreda Road, a piece on Atlanta Highway to finish connecting, once all said and done, from downtown all the way out to Taylor Road. And Wares Ferry Road, we have a piece in that area near the East Boulevard. And then we're looking at a buried fiber on the western side, to the west of I-65, down Maxwell Boulevard, out to Birmingham Highway, and then back up Air Base and Day Street.
We hadn't made any headway with letting Alabama Power, letting us put it on their pole, have we?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so. Yeah, the ones that we are looking at are places that we already have attachments.
Okay. While you're here, Wesley, outside of Madison Avenue and downtown, what other northern parts do you have on your map for North Montgomery? Is Lower Wetumpka Road on there?
So Lower Wetumpka, you can see Upper Wetumpka Road has existing fiber. We have some connection in place on Lower Wetumpka Road now, a small piece. But there are opportunities. You can see, I believe that's Van Diver right there, right there at the zoo where it ends. You know, there's some opportunities right in there, yeah, to continue that. And we've been working on trying to get that area connected.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cox, could I get you to update this group on the conversation with Captain Murphy, Chief Murphy. I got it wrong again. Chief Murphy, and between the city and the county about FUSIS. And I know that's a small component of it, but I want them to know how you guys are talking about working together.
Yes, ma'am. Also, part of this initiative, I know a larger area of this is in the city. We have identified some areas of priority in the county. And also, one other thing that we were looking at doing was also having a collaboration with the county on some of our cameras that's in the areas that are vital to them, and sharing access with the sheriff's office and having them able to access our cameras as well, even some that aren't in the county, maybe towards the county or whatever would be beneficial to them as well. And that's through our platform that we use now, the FUSIS Real-Time Crime Center platform.
So I think we're good on questions. And listen, that, you know, we will be working with all these groups and negotiating and trying to move things forward. So this is certainly not the only opportunity to ask questions, and we're happy to set up meetings and make connections with them after this, but wanted to give you all the opportunity to ask your questions and also for the public to hear those questions too. If you look in your packet, we want to give you a snapshot of where things stand and kind of what our big holes are, and they're not very big, but we are at a place where the end of the allocation process is very close, and we can focus on building out these programs. I would like to ask you all to look at these spreadsheets in a little more detail on your own, but the top lines of the money allocated from phases 1, 2, and 3, and again, these were in some cases pots of money that were created, in some cases they were direct allocations. You guys have allocated jointly $79.295 million. That's 92.6% of the funding between the two entities has been allocated already. That leaves about $6.336 million, so that's about 7.4% that's remaining. If there's any media there, I'll say that again, 92.6% of these funds have been allocated. Just working with some of your counterparts in Alabama and beyond, you guys are ahead of where a lot of folks are. Most folks are kind of allocated their money a little earlier on than you guys have, but they've taken a long time building out programming. And so this approach is, we've been building while allocating. All right, so feel like you are at a really good spot with where you are, and now we're at a process of shifting to getting funds obligated and getting these programs launched. There's kind of a general benchmark of launching some of these programs by or before January 1st of 2024. We think several of these critical home repair, small business could be launched this year, but if you launch it January 1st of 2024, that's going to give you 3 full years of programming. All right, so we feel like we're at a good spot. When you look at the money obligated or that's currently in review, that's 46 million of it, so a little over half of the money is obligated, or a couple of meetings and contract negotiations away from being obligated. And as you all know, our deadline for obligating these funds is December 31st of 2024. So that leaves 39.4 million that needs to be obligated and expended. All right, so I'm going to ask you to flip to this page that says what else? What else? So that big projects list, of that 39 million or so that's left, that most of that funding is tied up in 4 big projects. We've got the traditional sewer upgrades, all right, that there's 15.7 million, probably a little bit more. The reason that's not right at 16 is because that engineering assessment, those funds, that we're estimating that at 300,000, it probably will end up being a little less. Then there's the community center investments, that's 12.46.
What's the holdup on that?
Well, so the consensus on what to do, what we're hearing is there are kind of 3 things to do, or 3 options. There's a Montgomery Mall review option, there's a new community center option, or there's taking the money that's there for current renovations and adding to that and getting the current community centers up to par. We've heard from individuals about what it is you'd like to see, so we know individual preferences, but we take directions from the bodies. So the bodies have not given us
I think the body put this on there. The other 2 that you just named are individuals, because the body allocated 13 million to this project.
To community center investments is what the bodies allocate to. If there's a resolution.
That's right, to community centers, not mall investment and not whatever else you said. They allocated 13 million to community centers. You took a $500,000, a little over $500,000 to build a community center in Councilor Pruitt's district. This community center is supposed to go in the southwest Montgomery, Spring Valley, and Woodley Park area. Okay. The residents there are looking forward to this.
So
there's been no group discussion about doing something.
All we need for you to do, all we need from the county and or the city is a resolution that says that. So in the CalMAR, there is a resolution that specifically says allocating that money to the CalMAR Community Center. Otherwise, the only directive we have is community center investment, very broad. That's very broad. So if either body or both bodies passes a resolution saying, this is what we want this Woodley Road location, then we will get to work. Another option would be to do some design services and put an RFP out for some design services on all of these things that we're being told. So that is something that we need clear direction from the bodies on how you want us to proceed. We have been looking at those RFQs and things of that nature to make sure we're prepared once we get that. The other big pot is the sewer upgrades. If you all passed the resolution to enter into a MOU with Montgomery Water and Sewer, the city has passed that, the county has passed that. We have been in communication with Montgomery Water and Sewer, but what we have been told is that they need to hear from one or both of the bodies and get that on their agenda so they can also sign it. So as soon as we get that instruction as well, that's done, then we could start working on a sub-recipient agreement to try and get those funds over there for them to move forward. So that's the only thing that's missing on that. So those are the two big pots. Then that leaves the community restoration and recreation facilities upgrades. There's still some money that are in those pots that we need to put a project to. So the big picture is this, guys. Of all the things that you've done jointly, there's about $10.5 million left. Between the two of you guys, that's about $5.25 million. The city passed an omnibus, and so they have some preliminary line items for how they would spend that $5.2 million. The county does not. You know, we're really at a place where we could go forward with what we have, and I think it makes sense for you guys to consider keeping some residuals. Some of this may go over. There may be other administrative costs that come up. That's something that we need some direction from you all to decide if you want to just stick with what you have and have us move forward on that, and then you each kind of take this remaining $5.25 million and do what the county needs to do and do what the city needs to do separately.
Well, seeing as we've gone from 15 to 5, whoever's sitting here last can just make the decision on what we're going to do. But that we don't, you know, we're down to 5 people,
Yeah,
so
and
it's
we
time
don't
to
need a
adjourn.
decision
Probably.
today, but we just want to put that out there for you all's consideration. We hope you'll go back and talk with your colleagues, and we'll be awaiting your direction on that. The last thing that I will share is you all were emailed during this meeting an updated list of all of the project ideas that were submitted through Montgomery Thrive. So all of those beneficiary agreements are awarded through there. I picked out 4 in particular projects that are not in that spreadsheet, but who have given us proposals, and they're all very good proposals. Vantage, that's funding to support the St. Jude Senior Housing Initiative. Metropolitan Church submitted some proposals for some food security programming. Montgomery Housing Authority for community centers, and Alabama State University for tennis courts. So as you're looking at how to address some of these final funds, we encourage you to go back and look at what your community has submitted and what they've asked for you to consider, and that is in everyone's email. Susan, I don't have anything else. I think we're about ready to let you guys go home.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think the operative meeting is the April 18th meeting. I think we'll be talking with y'all about some of these programs and where everybody stands, and bring in some resolutions to get the critical home repair contract do the resolutions that let us move forward on these programs. So I think April 18th is the operative meeting. That gives the county time to review it at one meeting and then act on it the next meeting. But we're available. We'll be working on those resolutions, but it's basically the programs that you heard about today. You'll be seeing again on the April 18th meeting.
But Terry, thank you. You and Susan, thank you
Before
all.
you all leave, please, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I think it's important. Water and, the sewer situation. Critical, of course. Meet Treasury guidelines, perhaps more than anything we talked about, and I said that on more than one occasion. Has long-term impact, and you're not going to have to fund that again. I spoke with Mr. Bill Henderson, who is the manager of the Montgomery Water Works and Sanitary Sewer Board, and he's waiting on something that his attorneys can feel comfortable with before they sign on with the city and the county. And I thought that we had sent them something. Have they not gotten back with you?
They have not. I'll to make sure he got. So he has received an MOU the same one you signed, and a sample subrecipient agreement, like what the agreement, a baseline of what it would look like, but we can follow up with them.
Maybe we should have their attorneys write it so that it won't be anything that we.
We're fine with that. We've sent them a sample.
Yeah, but there's certain things that will have to be in there, but we're happy to work with their attorney. So we'll touch base with them and
Thank you.
get on that. So thank you, Commissioner.
Well,
for that
Susan,
update.
Terry, thank you again, all
Thank
y'all
you.
that came out and presented, thank you.